walk you through kind of our vision of the metaverse. As I said, if you have any questions, just kind of voice them, because on share screen, it's really hard to see the rest of the audience. So yeah, like I said, just kind of speak up if you have any questions, but there'll be some time for Q&A at the end. Just to start, I have to say this, this is not investment or legal advice. We may have a position in some of the companies or assets that are being mentioned throughout the conversation. We had interest, but again, this is not investment or legal advice, as you can see in the disclaimer. So what I want to start with is kind of what is the metaverse. If you go through and kind of look through the Twitter conversations, there's kind of a lot of different uses of the term. There's a lot of kind of upset people about the term being misrepresented and such. So the way we view the metaverse is kind of an aggregate of a lot of these kind of virtual worlds, virtual entities, games, it's kind of the big, it's kind of the big entity. And then it's populated by a lot of these different virtual worlds, games, applications, kind of the metaverse is the big aggregate. And then kind of the individual entities are kind of the little worlds within it. We do see the metaverse as kind of the next big frontier. Sometimes I say that, I would expect the metaverse to start being populated before we populate Mars. But that's kind of an important thing to kind of set the setting for. It's a really growing space, depending on kind of what you consider the metaverse to be. The market space can be a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger. But the one thing that's clear, it's a rapidly growing space. And it's incorporated kind of a lot of the previous tech that people were super excited about, like AR, VR, and it's even incorporating a lot of the kind of the stuff that was, got people excited about blockchain, like DeFi, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. I wanted to kind of discuss the metaverse stack a little bit, and I'll try to do that with kind of on the example of our own portfolio. So the way that we look at the metaverse stack is kind of a vertical way. On the base layer, we have infrastructure, right? And it's the things that allow the metaverse to kind of function. That includes layer one protocols, that includes CDNs, that includes kind of NFT standards, palettes, things like distributed storage, distributed computation, and it's the base technological components that kind of are necessary for everything else to function. In a lot of ways, it's kind of the layer zero of the metaverse stack. But given that I mentioned, there's layer one protocols being specifically developed for gaming and the metaverse, it's kind of a weird way to look at it. Then on top of that, we see kind of games and virtual worlds. In a lot of ways, kind of they are kind of the new layer ones. If you were around for kind of the 2018, 2017, 2018 kind of cycle, you can think of some of these worlds as kind of layer ones. There's a lot of stuff. A lot of people are trying to build them, and a lot of stuff is hopefully going to be built on top of them. That's kind of the one of the important components of these are just not flat games or flat worlds. There's stuff that can be built in them. On top of them, there's ways to interact between them as well. And all of the brands you're seeing, kind of, if you go to our site, these are examples from our own portfolio. So yeah, again, if you have any questions, feel free to kind of jump in. Then on top of that, we have creator platforms. And the metaverse needs content, right? And so things to be created in them. A lot of times we're thinking about creative platforms, we're thinking about art. If you've been following the crypto art space, you probably know the brand Known Origin. But there's a lot of stuff kind of around that as well. Collector items, music. One-off is kind of one of the kind of more exciting plays around music. There's lots of opportunities for creators of all kind of different angles. But the creative platforms are allowing us to onboard people from Web 2, people to kind of create within Web 3, and kind of populate the metaverse with all sorts of different content. Guilds kind of deserve kind of basically their own slot. I'll talk about how kind of guilds appeared a little bit later once we talk a little bit about PlaytoEarn. But basically, guilds are there to facilitate distribution in a lot of ways on their own, but also kind of facilitate user flow. And they have become kind of an important component to how the metaverse is being kind of how it functions and how all the different layers communicate with users. And then there's kind of some distribution stuff in terms of both launch platforms, kind of virtual spaces for sharing, and kind of content kind of creation. One important thing to mention here is that you can rearrange the stack in a lot of different ways, depending on how you want to view a particular project or the particular function of a group of projects. But this is kind of just one way to look at them. So I want to kind of go through some big trends within metaverses and kind of talk about some important components of it. Hopefully that will also clear some things up. So if we're thinking about the metaverse and think about the stack, there is kind of crypto art, collectibles, and play-to-earn gaming have been kind of the three things that really got people talking about the metaverse in 2021. Gaming and kind of crypto art has been around for years within blockchain space, but it's really hasn't gotten a lot of attention until really 2021. It's kind of the thing that happened after DeFi summer. People started paying attention, and the crypto art space has really grown. And attracted kind of a lot of retail attention in a lot of ways, because we're starting to see a lot of Web2 artists and just traditional artists being onboarded, talking and adding kind of a different element to the conversation. There's a lot of kind of known creator platforms, Nifty Gateway, Super Rare, Unknown Origin, Maker's Place. That's just within the Ethereum space. We've seen other blockchains start to incorporate creator platforms. Tezos has been, that's been a really big thing for them. And platforms like Hic et Nunc. There's kind of the generative art space and so forth. But the important thing to kind of understand is we're seeing kind of a lot of kind of traditional artists and digital artists kind of really starting to look at the space and trying to understand and kind of share their understanding of this space with their audiences. This is how we're starting to see a lot of kind of NFT conversations popping up on Instagram, right? It used to be Telegram, Twitter, Discord. Now we're seeing a lot of it on Instagram as well. And so within that, there's also kind of collectibles, and this is kind of where we see kind of crypto art starting to merge with kind of the collectible space. If you've been following around, you've probably seen news articles about really extraordinary crypto arts sales figures, Bored Apes sale figures. You've probably seen a lot of the kind of celebrities really trying to kind of jump into that space around this topic. And this has really been kind of a retail onboarding experience, because these collectibles, or a lot of these are PFPs. They've really kind of allowed people to join the community. One of the most exciting things about kind of the metaverse, this part of the metaverse, has been kind of the community experience, and Discord, Twitter, kind of the conversations, the learning, the onboarding of retail users and kind of education of them. That's been kind of an exciting thing. But one of the things you want to understand here is kind of PFPs are kind of evolving a lot into kind of just the starting component, right? If you follow the evolution of Bored Apes, they started as an exciting PFP project, but now they're building kind of their own ecosystem. and a metaverse of what they're calling the metaverse, but let's say kind of a virtual world experience of their own. And it's really grown into kind of their own environment. And so kind of PFPs can be a way to kind of build a community, but then, with the capital that provides, people are building kind of a lot more tools and experiences, really. And it's really about kind of developing these experiences. The two other projects that we have up on here is Axie Infinity, and it's probably the most well-known blockchain game around right now. It deserves its own kind of conversation, so I'll talk about it a little bit later. And then Art Blocks is kind of really put, I would say, generative art on the map in the blockchain space. You might have seen some of the articles and headlines around that as well. And it's really kind of offered kind of a way to bring together kind of art, programmatic experiences, and kind of a little bit of that kind of retail awareness as well, because we have seen kind of a number of celebrities jump in there. And then kind of the Play-to-Earn, as I said, is kind of that other also big component. So a few words about what Play-to-Earn is. If you've played games over the past decade or two, especially things like MMORPGs, you have kind of engaged with gaming economies, and you've probably earned some sort of, it doesn't matter what you're playing, RuneScape or World of Warcraft, Guild Wars, whatever, everybody had their favorite game. But you had a character, you engaged, you engaged time, you earned some gold, you earned some items, and so you had in-game currency, in-game assets, but everything was controlled by the publisher. There was no way for you to kind of monetize that. Yeah, sure, there were attempts at it, and later on with kind of Steam and skins for, let's say, things like Call of Duty, we saw a little bit of that. But generally speaking, everything was controlled by the publisher. They had the ability to kind of inflate everything and kind of destroy value. They had kind of all of the control regarding actual on-off ramp monetization. And so this was a closed ecosystem where gamers would contribute so much time and would really create the experience in the world, but then had no way to kind of extract value out of it and kind of take their assets with them and really own them. What Play-to-Earn has done is really allow players to monetize their time and skill, and kind of really become kind of not just contributors and kind of inhabitants of these worlds, but really kind of their owners. And kind of the best way to explain this is really with Axie Infinity. It's probably the best, the most known example of Play-to-Earn to this point, and kind of the really the most successful example of it to this point. And so Axie Infinity is a trading card game. I'll give you a little bit of example. I'm sure a lot of you know, but it just kind of helps to set the setting here. So Axie Infinity has it's a trading card game. All of the trading cards are, all of the Axie monsters are NFTs. They have different abilities. You do battle with them. You used to be able to go through player versus environment experience, battle kind of computer generated monsters, earn a little bit of SLP, and then you could also battle versus other players, earn a little bit of SLP. Now the SLP was the in-game currency of Axie Infinity. Well, it still is, and you could use it to breed other Axies, but you could also take it out to decentralized markets like SLP, and now later it got listed on centralized markets, and sell it. And so what players were able to do is, spend their time inside this game, play, and then, extract real fiat value out of it. And in certain economies, we saw that the kind of the amount of money people could earn playing this game started to surpass the minimum wage and really start to approach meaningful numbers. This was especially relevant in the Philippines. And so this started to impact real world economy where people, especially this became relevant during COVID when people, started, a lot of people went remote. There was difficulty with jobs. This really kind of catalyzed around, people could play a game and get a lot of value and help their families and help themselves with this. And so, we saw daily activity on Axie Infinity really jump. Axie is obviously not the only game around that's doing this, but it is one of the best well known. But we're seeing kind of a lot of games and kind of a lot of even Web2 developers who are coming into the space trying to adopt play-to-earn economics, right? Create an in-game economy that's also meaningful and has kind of on and exit ramps in terms of kind of fiat and allows players to monetize their time. The kind of the play-to-earn market potential is kind of pretty huge, again, because of how many things can integrate that economy style into them, right? Effectively, one of the great things, when I started talking about Metaverse, I was saying that, Metaverse is populated by a lot of virtual worlds. And so these virtual worlds can have, each world can have their own economy, a real economy that has kind of both ways to interact with other virtual worlds and also with kind of what we call the real world and fiat currencies. And that has huge potential. And so, when I say we're going to be settling the Metaverse, we're already seeing kind of major brands stake their claim to different components, to different games, whether it be advertising or kind of their attempts to create content that kind of translates from Web2 to Web3. But yeah, there's huge potential. And I want to kind of take a little bit of time and talk about the virtual worlds themselves. The four that we have up on screen right now are kind of the best known virtual worlds coming from kind of the Ethereum space. Obviously, kind of a lot of layer one ecosystems are developing their own virtual worlds, but these are the ones that really kind of impacted the conversation early on. CryptoVoxels is the one without a token right now, and it's kind of really kind of one of the early ones and one of the playgrounds for people to kind of really experiment. Decentraland was kind of one of the earlier bigger brands where they really started to work on kind of other things being built on top of them. And this is kind of an important concept to understand. The virtual worlds, they're virtual environments. They have land components. You can buy these land, but the important thing is that they're not just flat. You can build on top of them. You can interact in them. CryptoVoxels became a huge space for virtual art galleries, right? We talked earlier about how much money is being created, how much value is being created around blockchain based art. But where do you display it? And so CryptoVoxels became one of the places where people were building galleries and creating shows. Actually had I gave a little kind of speech within a CryptoVoxels environment as well. It's it's kind of a cool experience. And Decentraland was one of those spaces where other developers came in and started building on top of them. Sandbox is kind of the most the brand that people are probably most excited about right now. And you see a lot of kind of even traditional brands starting to kind of influencers starting to kind of look for a spot in the Sandbox universe. And Insomnium Space is probably one of the more tech advanced ones in terms of kind of the VR capabilities of it. And you probably see they try to do kind of hosted events. They try to do kind of party type things, and really this became super relevant again during kind of the pandemic because how separated people were, and we started seeing things like museums try to host virtual environment, virtual events. And these worlds not only kind of incorporate those experiences, but they allow the participants to also be the owners, because you're able to own the land on which, let's say galleries are built, and kind of become kind of not only a kind of a bystander, but an active participant of this ecosystem. So, with kind of Decentraland, right, as an example, we saw that, Decentral Games came in and started building, casino type games in there, and you can walk in and, have a virtual casino experience. We're seeing things being built inside the sandbox. And as I mentioned, there's a lot more of these being built. I gave you kind of an example of kind of new virtual worlds being built, but there's also concepts around, mapping the real world and selling off kind of digital markers to the real world, right? So in certain applications, right, you can kind of buy the land plot, the virtual land plot associated with the Eiffel Tower, for instance. And kind of that has a lot of applications where it comes to kind of AR, VR experiences. And so kind of, we're seeing kind of a number of things that are being played around with in that regard. As I mentioned, lands are kind of the core component of these virtual worlds, in the sense that, everything's being built on top of them. And so kind of as the popularity of these worlds has grown, so has kind of, the demand, and so the land prices, because, in a lot of ways, land plots are kind of limited, although there's also the component of, you want to be close to kind of the popular land slots. So a lot of the dynamics that we see in traditional real estate are starting to play into virtual world real estate. And we even seeing kind of companies that are popping up and trying to kind of replicate, kind of real estate applications for, let's say, searching for land, right? And analyzing kind of prices and things like that. So we're starting to see like a lot of these ancillary tools that are kind of popping up, and kind of because there is more demand, because people are starting to look for this stuff. And now I want to spend a little bit of time on Metaverse tokens. I've mentioned a lot of them throughout kind of the previous 20 minutes. But I want to kind of take a moment to really kind of discuss what they mean and what they are. So there's a few type of tokens that can exist within the Metaverse ecosystem. There are your in-game currencies, your standard ERC20 tokens. And the example I gave you within Axie was SLP. There are NFT tokens, typically ERC 721 standard, or if we're on Ethereum, or ERC 1155. And these can be associated with land assets, collectible game items, game characters, skins, and so forth. And these are kind of things you either build on top of, things you play with, things you accessorize with, basically everything that can be unique to some extent. And then there's also governance tokens, which also typically, come as ERC20. And then, as an example, within Axie Infinity, you see SLP, and then you have AXS. That's the governance token. And that enables the participants within the ecosystem to really not just be bystanders, right? As I mentioned, prior, a lot of things were controlled by the publisher. Here we're seeing kind of an attempt to give players kind of the opportunity to engage and kind of set the direction and the tone and kind of what's happening within the metaverse, within the worlds that they're living in, right? Really partake in the governance. Now, it's important to kind of understand the distinction of these, and it's important to there's kind of flavors that go in the middle and kind of various different degrees. There are NFT tokens that can be used as access tokens, but these are kind of, I would say, the core components that you want to kind of start your understanding with. And it's important to understand that because as we're saying, these virtual worlds have their own economies and their own governance structures. It's not enough anymore to just kind of build an exciting game. It's important to understand that what the economy is going to function like, what governance is going to function like, because these things can break environments, just like if a country has a broken economy, that will have a very negative impact on its citizens. Two or three kind of key cases where we see kind of usage of tokens that I want to mention. Tokens in their distribution can be used to attract users. You've probably heard a lot about token drops, and kind of token drops can be a way to kind of provide a little bit of value or a lot of value to a user group to get them invested and interested in the ecosystem. They get a little bit of a token. They want to see kind of the platform oftentimes. Now, there's various different successes to that, but that's one attempt. Now, the vampire attack is something that has first appeared with the Uniswap, SushiSwap story, where Uniswap is very popular DEX, and that didn't have a token. SushiSwap came in, kind of forked them, built a little bit around it, and basically tried to attract away Uniswap users with this additional value of these new tokens. Now, where it comes to the virtual worlds, we see OpenSea, which is kind of the dominant aggregator marketplace for pretty much most things NFT. It didn't have a token. And so we saw recently a number of attempts of platforms trying to kind of build off of the idea of what they were doing, but actually empower users with these, tokens to kind of have them become kind of part of the community and have them feel like, they can make an impact and govern and, be not just partakers in the ecosystem of the platform, but also part owners. And so kind of the easiest way to do this is, because blockchain is transparent, you can identify all of the users of OpenSea and you can drop a token to all of the users of OpenSea. And what that does is it kind of, you're able to target real traders, real users who have the need for this particular service, and try to kind of steal them away from your direct competitor in this way. Now, we've seen multiple attempts. LooksRare, X2Y2 have already tried this. And this is kind of, one of those examples of when the blockchain space is not super cooperative, but actually rather competitive. But we also see that simply creating a token, doesn't necessarily do much. There needs to be a functioning economy. Otherwise, what you see is, people, see this value, they take those tokens, they sell those tokens, and then they go back to their, regular original behavior. I won't, if you followed the story, you also probably heard a lot about wash trading, but that kind of merits its own conversation. So I won't go into that right now unless there are questions about it. And then the other kind of point that I want to make is about kind of what happens if the economy isn't functioning properly. So I told you a little bit about Axie Infinity earlier, and how you can earn SLP. And it used to be, by the way, if you're hearing dogs barking, I apologize about that. The SLP function where players could play versus a computer, earn SLP. They could play against other players, earn SLP, and there's kind of lots of reward systems to get people excited about kind of the possibility of earning. What happened is one, you saw the demand of for NFT items needed to play the games really rise. And so, at one point we saw that for a player to enter the Axie ecosystem, they needed, anywhere from $600 to $1,000 to really create a meaningful starter set. And that kind of defeated the purpose of trying to help kind of real people in developing economies, right? Because they were trying to see Axie Infinity as an opportunity to make some money. $600 to $1,000 to just start playing something is a lot of money. So this is where we saw kind of guilds appear, and what guilds started to do was provide players with these items for a fraction of the revenue, right? And so they kind of stepped in as that middle layer where people didn't need any starter income. They would get these items from the guild, go play, earn some money, give a portion to the guild. The guild could then kind of reinvest it and create more playable characters. What we saw also from that is that you saw rampant inflation of SLP. And you can see how high SLP prices have been and how far they've fallen. People would play and just try to monetize basically immediately. There wasn't a lot of things and a lot of incentive for them to hold SLP. And so, they would earn, they would sell on the market into fiat and go about playing more. The inflation really created pressure on SLP. And as the price of SLP went down, it became less and less profitable for players to play, creating this kind of negative feedback loop. And so, and anybody who played Axie Infinity even early kind of saw that problem early on. But when there were few players at a smaller scale, the problem kind of wasn't very painful. Game was growing. It kind of made some sense. But if you were analyzing this from a kind of a virtual world economy perspective, you saw that there was a lot of things that were broken. And when the system started to scale, the problems got exacerbated, and kind of we saw the kind of the effect it had. And so very recently, Axie Infinity actually revamped their economy and changed their reward distribution to really slash the inflation, right? They took away a lot of kind of player versus environment rewards. They really slashed some of these daily rewards to really incentivize kind of PvP action and reduce the amount of pressure. Right now, this is still kind of a lot of it kind of comes from a centralized place, but we see, with the introduction of the XS token that, at some point, hopefully, the participants of this ecosystem, of this world, are going to be able to kind of affect change onto the economy and kind of the different components of what's happening around in their world themselves. We see that, to some extent already in DeFi protocols, but virtual worlds kind of started to grow and get popularity a little bit later, and so kind of they're a little bit behind where it comes to kind of decentralized governance of their components a little bit. Now, it's also important to understand that tokens are not everything. There's a lot of examples of kind of people kind of speculating, chasing profits, game developers rather acting not in the best interest of the community. Lots of kind of pump and dumps lots of broken economies where the token pumps on people's expectations. But as I mentioned, similar to what I just explained with Axie, just the economy is broken, and so token value isn't sustainable, and things break apart. And just as quickly as you see kind of a rise in users, there's not a lot of loyalty. Token price dumps, players disappear. So it's important to understand that while the tokens allow for a more kind of transparent and kind of fair distribution of value potentially with respect to ecosystem participants, simply adding a token to an ecosystem doesn't provide that. You need to be very thoughtful about the economy within which you're trying to integrate this. And I want to also kind of spend a few minutes on kind of where the future is going, because a lot of what kind of we discussed right now in the grand scheme, right, like decentralized virtual worlds, gaming, fully on blockchain, they're not quite possible yet because the infrastructure needed to support a lot of these things is just not there, right? Even some of the more scalable architecture right now struggles with even kind of the simple games, and so developers are forced to kind of compromise, make something centralized, decide on what needs to be on the blockchain, what can be off chain, how do you use these components not to compromise the ethos. And so you see kind of a gradient of kind of how developers are using the blockchain. We've seen even from an economy perspective, right, Ethereum's current scalability issues, right? Anytime there's a major kind of PFP drop, even, right? Forget about games, a major PFP drop, the price of gas skyrockets to the point where operation on chain becomes very difficult. And we've seen what happens, with some of the kind of more scalable chains like Solana and Avalanche. They run into their own issues. And so, we still consider this a work in progress. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, that there is a lot of kind of infrastructure that we're looking at. And so there is kind of even layer ones built specifically for games, right? We're talking about people looking ahead at distributed computation, distributed storage, interoperability between worlds, which is super important and kind of is, going to help us hopefully to realize that future. But it is kind of a vision we're still having, right? Rather than something we already have. And it's important to understand when you kind of evaluate what you're looking at, because, some of the projects, they're assuming that, that technology is going to be there, but, it's still in progress. And so we are, when you see a game that's not kind of fully decentralized, you have to understand, when what's capable right now and why they're making that compromise. Yeah, that's kind of I'll see what I wanted to talk to you about. If you have any questions right now, happy to answer any. Yeah, hopefully this was useful.
That was great, and we'll now take questions from the room. Okay, I have a question for you, Ilya. So, from your perspective as an investor, right? You look at the current game scene and the blockchain ecosystem. I think it's very interesting to point out, and I think a lot of people will agree with me that it's a much more speculative market compared to traditional gaming. In traditional games, people talk about graphics. People talk about gameplay, and now in a crypto space, people are just talking about prices and how much they've been earning. And where do you see this gap coming to a close in the future? And is there going to be a bridge, or how's the market kind of, or from your perspective, what are you looking at in terms of investing in the space?
So I think that what you mentioned is a really key point because it deals with perception of the industry, right? And if you look at the recent stories, there's been a lot of pushback from traditional gamers against traditional companies trying to do something with NFT technology, right? There's been, kind of a whole host of companies that have tried and then had to kind of retract because the gamers, their audiences were super against it. I think Stalker is kind of one of those examples, but there's been a kind of a lot in recent months, and that has a lot to do with that perception that the blockchain gaming space is about speculation. Now, that has a lot to do with how the media portrays it and how kind of, what you see on crypto Twitter. But if you talk to kind of fundamental investors, if you talk to game developers, if you talk to actual gamers, that's not what they're there for. And even if you talk to kind of Axie Infinity gamers, right, and there's a lot of perception that they're there to just earn money. But if you talk to them, you'll see that a lot of it, why they're there is because they like the game, they like the community feel, they like the interaction, the competitiveness of it. And so part of what we're going to need to be dealing with here is kind of changing the narrative more than changing what's actually being done. And so people who are in the space understand that people building, for them, this is about kind of pushing the edge. But the perception, because of the articles, and this is kind of, about clicks more than anything else, they're about kind of prices, sales, and all that. But within kind of how the space is going to grow, I think once we see more use cases, the narrative is going to be changing a lot more. We're already seeing traditional companies trying to kind of enter these virtual worlds because they want their brands displayed on these virtual buildings. They want their brands to have their, their items and their things to appear within kind of the avatar context. And so as we see that, not on just kind of roadmaps, but in actual implementation, I think the narrative is going to start to change a little bit.
Thank you. That was really good. And another question that I have for you is when we think about traditional games that developers and developing companies are selling straight copies to the gamers, they're selling game items to the gamers. They're basically capturing all the revenue stream from their gamers. But in crypto, right, you have only a small portion of the revenue shared by the team, and oftentimes a lot of the volumes are traded in between gamers. Would that pose a sort of like encumbrance for tech giants that wants to get in the space, that wants to develop complex gameplays, but they cannot get the future returns from the gamers, since it's it's a community almost and a lot of games are working as DAOs? Is that going to pose any shades on very experienced game developer firms to get into the space?
So I think the understanding of the new economic paradigm is causing a lot of traditional companies to take pause, right? Because as you mentioned, this isn't their standard economic model. They have a way that they're doing it. A lot of these companies are public. There's that component of it as well. But I think that there is a misconception that in the new economic paradigm, the developer companies are going to have very limited revenue opportunities. And I believe that's just not true. Because if you think about kind of where the different things appear, right? There's basic things like, for instance, having, being able to take, fees off of, transactions in your world, right? And if you free up the ability for creators and gamers to kind of transact and kind of own their value, the amount of value being transacted increases immensely, right? And so just off of that component, you're talking about really, really interesting kind of value creation opportunities. On top of that, right, kind of instead of, let's say, kind of creating new seasons the way kind of traditional game companies are doing right now, they have the opportunity to do kind of NFT drops of different generations that, we already see right now what smaller companies are being able to gather in terms of like single NFT drops with smaller communities. There are a lot of interesting revenue generating opportunities for kind of developing publishing companies, but they're different from what they're kind of accustomed to right now. So the question is going to be, how do they adjust and move to a new paradigm? But I don't think that they're going to get squeezed out in any way. It's just a matter of, they need to understand kind of a new place that they fit into. And I think that they're actually, they have more opportunity for growth because, they may have a smaller percentage of the pie, but if the pie grows tremendously, their actual revenue will as well, potentially.
Thanks. That was a really good answer. Thank you, Ilya. Do we have any questions from others from the room? Anyone from Zoom? Is anyone? Okay. Thank you, Ilya. I think that's it for today, and we really enjoy you being here. And I think we should stay in touch. And we have a lot of kids at Blockchain USC that are eager to work in the industry. So if you guys are ever hiring anyone, please reach out to us, and we'll love to stay in touch and come up with more collaboration.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. And I have my contact information up on screen. If anybody has any questions or want to share an idea, want to talk things over, feel free to reach out. It's really easy to do. You don't have to kind of do any formal meetings. We're easy to talk to. Just reach out. No questions are bad. No ideas are bad. Just kind of, we're open to talking to everybody. So, thank you so much for your time. And